For thousands of years, the walls of Egypt's temples and tombs have whispered in silence, covered in enigmatic symbols we call hieroglyphs. To the casual eye, they are mere pictures, birds, eyes, serpents, and suns carved into stone. But what if these were not just an ancient writing system? What if they were doorways to a higher consciousness, a language designed not simply to record history, but to awaken the soul? Most of us were taught that hieroglyphs were the Egyptians' way of documenting laws, trade, and daily life. But to the initiated, to those who walked the path of the priesthood, these symbols were far more than communication. They were living forces, sacred vibrations captured in form. Each glyph carried within it not just a meaning, but an energy, an alchemical power meant to transform the mind and align it with the cosmos. Why do you think the ancients spent lifetimes inscribing them in temples, carving them into sarcophagi, painting them across papyri? Not for mere decoration, not for simple record-keeping. The hieroglyphs were a code, one that could open the hidden chambers of human consciousness. A code we, in the modern world, have only begun to scratch the surface of. In this journey, we will pierce through the veil of conventional history to explore what the hieroglyphs truly represented. We'll uncover why the ancients considered language itself to be sacred, how these symbols connected human beings to divine forces, and what hidden truths they still hold for us today. Stay with me, because what you are about to discover may forever change how you view not only ancient Egypt, but the very nature of reality itself. To understand the hidden truth of hieroglyphs, we must first step back into the world of ancient Egypt. Not the Egypt of tourist pyramids and Hollywood movies, but the Egypt of mystery schools, sacred initiations, and cosmic alignment. The Egyptians did not see the world the way we do. To them, reality was not divided into the physical and the spiritual. Life was a seamless continuum of visible and invisible forces, where every action echoed into eternity. Within this worldview, language itself was not a human invention, but a divine gift. They believed words could shape reality, that sound and symbol had the power to summon gods, command spirits, and alter the fabric of existence. The very word hieroglyph means sacred carving. These were not casual inscriptions. They were considered the literal embodiment of divine speech, the language of the Neteru, the Egyptian deities. To carve a hieroglyph was to anchor a cosmic principle into stone. Each symbol was more than a picture. It was a vessel of energy, a mirror of natural and spiritual law. Take, for example, the glyph of the Ankh. To the modern eye, it is a curious cross with a loop. To the Egyptians, it was the key of life, representing the eternal breath of spirit, the union of masculine and feminine energies, the doorway between the seen and unseen. Or consider the Eye of Horus, which we often reduce to a symbol of protection. In truth, it encoded advanced knowledge of human perception, mathematics, and the subtle energies of consciousness. But why was this deeper layer hidden? The answer lies in the structure of Egyptian society. Knowledge was never freely distributed. It was safeguarded within the temples, revealed only to those who underwent initiation. The average person might see hieroglyphs as storytelling, but the priests and adepts saw in them sacred formulas. To them, writing was magic and reading was ritual. Over time, as empires rose and fell, this understanding was lost. When the Greeks arrived, they tried to decode the hieroglyphs as mere words. Later, Western scholars approached them as a puzzle of language. Only fragments of their true essence survived in whispers, legends of sacred writing, mystical spells, and the so-called Book of the Dead. Philosophically, this reveals something profound. Humanity once understood that symbols are not passive. They are active forces. The ancients lived in a symbolic universe where every image, every sound, every sign carried layers of meaning. And in forgetting this truth, we have also forgotten something about ourselves. Because if language can shape reality, what does that say about the words we use today? What power lies dormant in the symbols that surround us? And what might we rediscover if we learn to see as the Egyptians once did? When we look at Egyptian hieroglyphs today, we often see them as art or history. But to the ancients, they were alive. Each hieroglyph was not simply a character, but a vibrational key, a living force encoded into symbol. Take the scarab beetle, known as Khepri. To us, it's just an insect rolling a ball of dung. But to the Egyptians, this was the very image of cosmic renewal. The scarab pushing its sphere mirrored the sun god Ra, rolling the solar disk across the heavens each day. In hieroglyphic writing, this single symbol invoked not just an insect, but the universal principle of rebirth, transformation, and eternal cycles. By writing it, one aligned with that cosmic law. Another profound example is the feather of Ma'at. On the surface, it represented truth and justice. But when carved into temple walls or funerary texts, it wasn't simply symbolic. It carried the vibrational weight of cosmic order itself. To speak the glyph of Ma'at was to call upon harmony, the principle that balanced the stars, the Nile, and the human soul. This is why the Egyptians called their writing Mita Netjer, the words of the gods. They didn't believe they were inventing language. They believed they were transmitting divine patterns, crystallizing spiritual forces into visible form. Modern linguists, even after the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, reduced hieroglyphs into phonetics, sounds, syllables, and translations. But the Egyptians weren't only recording words. They were encoding multi-layered knowledge. Each glyph operated simultaneously on different levels. It was an image, a sound, and a spiritual principle all at once. It's like looking at a painting that also functions as a word, while also serving as a metaphysical equation. Hieroglyphs were multidimensional. This is why reading hieroglyphs wasn't just literacy, it was initiation. It was training the mind to perceive reality through symbols, to awaken the hidden eye of understanding. And this is also why hieroglyphs filled tombs and temples. They weren't decorative. They were functional. They acted like talismans, sealing sacred energy into stone. A tomb inscribed with hieroglyphs wasn't merely a burial chamber. It was a map for the soul's journey, a vibrational field designed to guide the spirit through death and into eternity. What was lost for centuries was not only a language, but a way of seeing the world, a way of recognizing that symbols shape consciousness and that the universe itself speaks in signs. To understand the deeper dimension of hieroglyphs, we must recognize that they were not simply linguistic tools. They were maps of hidden sciences, bridges between matter and spirit. The Egyptians encoded mathematics, geometry, astronomy, and psychology into their writing because they saw no separation between these domains. For them, language, number, and form were different expressions of the same universal order. Consider sacred geometry. Many hieroglyphic symbols are based on archetypal shapes, circles, triangles, spirals, and the proportions of the golden ratio. These were not decorative flourishes. They were reflections of cosmic architecture. A circle could represent the sun, eternity, and divine perfection all at once. A triangle might signify balance between the earthly and the divine. In this way, hieroglyphs mirrored the geometrical principles found in pyramids, temples, and even the structure of the human body. To write with these forms was to participate in the harmony of creation. Sound, too, was inseparable from hieroglyphs. Every glyph carried a phonetic vibration, and the Egyptians believed sound shaped reality. To speak a word was to call its essence into existence. This is why incantations, prayers, and ritual chants were so meticulously constructed. The act of uttering hieroglyphs aloud was not communication but creation. A single word, pronounced with intent, could protect, curse, heal, or invoke divine presence. In this way, writing was not passive, it was magical technology. And beyond geometry and sound lies psychology. The Egyptians understood that symbols live in the human psyche, shaping how we think and perceive. A hieroglyph was not only external but internal. It awakened something in the subconscious. When one contemplated the image of the scarab or the eye of Horus, it activated archetypes deep within the mind. These symbols guided behavior, oriented the soul, and prepared consciousness for spiritual awakening. In many ways, hieroglyphs functioned like keys to the unconscious, long before modern psychology gave words to such processes. This intertwining of science, spirit, and psyche is what makes Egyptian writing unlike any other. It was not a mere recording system, it was a multidimensional framework of knowledge. Through it, the Egyptians preserved mysteries of astronomy, medicine, and metaphysics while also guiding initiates through the inner journey of self-discovery. Every temple wall was a living book. Every glyph was both a fact and a prayer. Modern readers often look at hieroglyphs as a puzzle solved by translation. But translation only touches the surface. True understanding requires an initiation of perception, where one learns to read symbols not as static signs, but as living currents of energy. The Egyptians were not simply writing, they were aligning themselves with cosmic laws, embedding knowledge into form, and transmitting it across millennia. In this sense, hieroglyphs were the original shadow work. They forced one to confront hidden realities, both in the cosmos and within the self. By studying and embodying these symbols, the initiate was transformed. To read was to awaken. If hieroglyphs were more than words, then their relationship to spiritual awakening becomes clearer. Awakening is not about adopting beliefs. It is about perceiving reality beyond the veil of illusion. In this sense, hieroglyphs acted as mirrors for the soul. They pointed the initiate inward, urging them to confront both their light and their shadow. Consider the Eye of Horus. On the surface, it is a symbol of protection and divine sight. But within the temple teachings, it was also a reminder of wholeness after fragmentation. Horus lost his eye in the cosmic battle with Set, the embodiment of chaos and darkness. The healing of his eye symbolized the reintegration of what had been broken. To meditate on this glyph was to confront one's own wounds and bring them into harmony. This is the very essence of shadow work, the act of reclaiming the pieces of the self that fear, trauma, and denial have cast aside. Spiritual awakening without shadow work risks becoming shallow, even dangerous. Awakening opens one to light, but shadow work roots that light in truth. The Egyptians knew that to ascend to higher states of consciousness, one must first pass through the underworld of the psyche. Their hieroglyphs often depicted journeys into darkness, trials, tests, and encounters with gods who personified both terror and wisdom. Reading these glyphs was not merely intellectual, it was a rehearsal for one's own inner journey. The scarab beetle offers another example. To modern eyes, it is a simple insect. To the Egyptians, it symbolized rebirth and transformation, for the scarab rolls a ball of earth, burying it, and from it new life emerges. Contemplating this glyph was an invitation to face the cycles of death and rebirth within oneself. What must die in me for something greater to be born? What outdated patterns must be buried so that my soul can rise? Such reflections lie at the heart of shadow work, where destruction and creation walk hand in hand. In practical terms, hieroglyphs were meditative anchors. Initiates would study them not just as learners, but as seekers. They would chant their sounds, visualize their forms, and absorb their layered meanings until the symbol came alive within. Through this process, the hieroglyph became a portal, a doorway into higher consciousness and a tool for integrating suppressed aspects of the self. Each glyph was a step in the awakening process, demanding self-confrontation and offering transformation. This is why the Egyptians carved their walls with such devotion. They were not preserving stories for future generations. They were embedding consciousness into stone. Anyone who stood before the temple inscriptions was being invited into a spiritual dialogue, a silent initiation. The writing itself whispered, "Face your darkness, embody your light, and awaken to the eternal order of the cosmos." Hieroglyphs, therefore, are not relics of a dead language. They are living reminders of an ancient truth, that enlightenment is impossible without integration, and that the journey to the divine always passes through the shadow. The Egyptians encoded this wisdom in every line, every symbol, every sacred word. To read them properly is to walk the same inner path, to awaken, to descend, and to rise again whole. The hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt were not created to simply decorate walls or record the mundane details of history. They were spiritual blueprints, encoded with lessons for the soul. Every line, curve, and image carried truths about the human journey, reminding us that awakening is not achieved by escaping the world, but by entering deeply into ourselves. The Egyptians understood what many seekers today are rediscovering, that the light we long for is inseparable from the shadow we fear. Spiritual awakening is not a blissful escape, but a radical confrontation with the parts of ourselves we would rather deny. This is why shadow work and awakening are not separate paths, but one continuous journey. Hieroglyphs made this truth visible. They showed, through symbols like the Eye of Horus or the scarab, that wholeness comes only when brokenness is embraced, that death and rebirth are two sides of the same transformation, and that light shines brightest when it has traveled through darkness. In this sense, hieroglyphs remain alive. To study them today is to step into the same stream of wisdom that once guided the initiates of the Nile. We do not need to live in ancient temples to hear their message. Their silent whispers reach across millennia, inviting us to remember that the path to awakening is not upward alone, but inward and downward as well. It asks us to meet the shadow, to honor it, and to allow it to become the soil in which the higher self takes root. The hidden link between spiritual awakening and shadow work is this: both are movements toward wholeness, and wholeness was the great secret the Egyptians carved into stone. To awaken is to see, and to see fully is to welcome both light and shadow. The hieroglyphs remind us that enlightenment is not perfection, it is integration. It is the courage to face the underworld of the self, the wisdom to bring its treasures to light, and the strength to live as a soul that has become whole. When we look upon these ancient symbols with open eyes and open hearts, we are not gazing at a forgotten language, we are remembering our own.